Auschwitz, 1941. A prison, a death camp, a place where human hope is crushed. But in the middle of the horrors of cruelty and death, one man brings life and hope. His name is Maximilian Kolbe. On the 28th of July 1941, a prisoner escapes. 10 others must die in his place. The Nazi guards call out 10 names. One man, whose name is called, begs for mercy. "My wife, my children," he pleads. And then a voice that would defy evil itself. "I'll take his place," he said. "I have no wife and children." Everyone in the camp was amazed at what they had just heard. Officers, prisoners and guards were all shared a common disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Who was this man? Why would he trade his life for another? What drove him to this moment, and how did his sacrifice change history? This is the story of Maximilian Kolbe. Maximilian Kolbe was born on the 8th of January 1894 in Zunska Wola, a small city in Russia-occupied Poland. He was one of 5 children, 3 of whom survived to adulthood. He came from a devout Catholic family and had a profound spiritual experience as a child. This experience, a vision of the Blessed Virgin, had a huge impact on the rest of his life. In 1910, at the age of 16, he joined the Franciscan order and took religious vows. 2 years later, he went to Rome to study for the priesthood at the Gregorian University. In the following years, he earned doctorates in both philosophy and theology. In 1917, he also founded a Catholic prayer group known as the Army of the Immaculate to fight Freemasonry, a force he seen as enemies of the Catholic Church. He was ordained as a Franciscan priest in Rome in 1918 and returned to his homeland of Poland in 1919. At this time, Europe was in chaos following the First World War when Kolbe returned to Poland. So he began work as a Catholic priest and continued his work of dedication to spread the Catholic religion. And in 1922, he established a magazine known as the Night of the Immaculata. About 5 years later, in 1927, Kolbe went further and set up a monastery near Warsaw with hundreds of Franciscan friars dedicated to spreading the Catholic faith throughout Poland. This monastery became known as the City of the Immaculate and became one of the most successful Catholic publishing centers in the world, producing millions of religious publications annually. Maximilian Kolbe also had a global vision for spreading the Catholic faith and went to Japan in 1930 to promote it. The following year, 1931, he established a major publishing monastery in Japan, which was similar to the one in Poland, and this too was also very successful. However, he returned to Poland in 1936, partly due to health reasons, but also with the intention of expanding his publications throughout Europe. By 1938, he even established a Catholic radio station at the City of the Immaculate. However, Europe was now entering a very troubled phase, one of its darkest periods. Communism had dominated Russia for over 20 years and was seen as a threat in Poland and also to other many Eastern European countries. On the other hand, Hitler had developed an equally destructive doctrine. So although they were very different in nature, they shared a common anti-Christian approach based on theft and murder. So it was somewhat inevitable that Kolbe would come into conflict with these forces at some point in the future. At their core, of course, both communism and Nazism were deeply atheistic doctrines and were opposed to all forms of Christianity. Despite their political differences, on the 23rd of August 1939, Hitler and Stalin agreed a secret pact to divide Poland along the Bug River. This was known as the Molotov-Rippentrop Pact. Although political enemies, Germany and the Soviet Union agreed not to go to war with each other while they both attacked weaker nations in Eastern Europe. It was a pact between thieves, basically, that could not last long. So on the 1st of September 1939, it allowed Hitler to invade Poland and began what became the Second World War. 2 weeks later, the Soviet Union attacked Poland from the east, so that by early October 1939, Poland was fully occupied by these two powers and cease to exist as an independent nation. After the invasion, the Nazis moved quickly and took over Kolbe's publishing centre. Kolbe was arrested along with dozens of other friars by the Gestapo in September 1939. However, they were released 3 months later in December. Kolbe continued to shelter Polish Jews and refugees and work as an anti-Nazi activist right throughout 1940. He was eventually arrested on the 17th of February 1941 and taken to Pojak prison in Warsaw. These were extremely difficult times. The forces of atheism and evil were on the march throughout Europe. Maximilian Kolbe was transferred from Pojak prison to Auschwitz Concentration Camp on the 28th of May 1941. Conditions at Auschwitz were appalling, very brutal. Prisoners were half-starved most of the time and had to work extremely hard and were often brutally beaten. Despite these conditions, Maximilian Kolbe continued to act as a priest, offering comfort and prayers to fellow inmates. In July 1941, a prisoner escaped from Auschwitz. As a collective punishment, the Nazi officers selected 10 men for execution. One of the men whose name was called out, Franciszek Gajowniczek, cried out for mercy. He pleaded for his wife and children. Maximilian Kolbe stepped forward and offered to take his place. The Nazi officers agreed actually to this substitution, and Kolbe and 9 others were sent to an underground starvation cell. After 2 weeks, only Kolbe himself remained alive, and he was killed by lethal injection by the Nazi officers on the 14th of August 1941. His sacrifice was seen as the brightest spark in the darkest of times, the supreme sacrifice of Christian love amidst the horrors of evil. Maximilian Kolbe was declared a saint by Pope John Paul II in 1982. The man he saved 40 years earlier also attended the ceremony. Kolbe's sacrifice continues to be seen as one of the greatest examples of Christian love in the struggle against atheism. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. As I was saying there during the video, the Second World War was largely about atheism at war with itself. 2 forms of atheism. On the one hand, you had Karl Marx, who was a total fantasist a couple of 100 years ago, brought up a theory that communism could solve humanity's problems, and that all ended up in a farce back 30 or 40 years ago, after it had killed 50 or 60 million people in both China and Russia. And then, of course, on the other hand, Hitler, who was influenced by Nietzsche and other German philosophers like that, who also were very atheistic in their thinking. They thought they had a solution to humanity's problems as well. And of course, both communism and Nazism were both based on mass murder and mass theft. And therefore, the idea that you hear some of the new atheists, there's nothing new about them actually. They have an original idea in their head. It's all based on old atheism, the old Bertrand Russell teacup thing and all that sort of stuff. But you have these people promoting the idea that atheism is a good thing. Well, Second World War, there was nothing good about that, and it was basically 2 forms of atheism at war with itself. This is what we need to keep in mind in order to keep an awareness of the actual damage that the new atheists who are totally ignorant of history, they might know something about philosophy and science, things like that, but they have no real concept of history and the damage that has been done by the old atheism in the past. So I intend to make a number of other videos along these lines, and I have made a couple in the past couple of months. Please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see those or see them in the future. Thank you very much for watching for today, and goodbye for now. Thank you.